Well, a very good morning to you and welcome to Wednesday Wanderings. My name is Mark Long, rector of the parish of St Andrew in Newlands, Cape Town. A very blessed and happy new year to you all as we enter into 2022, or as I think it's becoming more commonly known, 2022. And I also hear from various social media sources that this is the year of tutification of the church in particular. So yes, we begin the new year aware of the deeply sad loss of the death of Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu, and someone who's really touched our national life, our global environment, and many of our lives personally in so many deep and special ways throughout his ministry. And of course, the huge impact he had on helping lead us into 1994 and the birth of democracy in Southern Africa. So lots to be thankful for in his memory, but also a deep sadness that his voice and presence is no longer part of our world. And so as we begin 2022, we do so with that sense of loss, but also that wonderful sense of just being reminded of what a difference it makes when people stand up for what is good and right and wholesome in life. Something that for me Desmond did in absolutely every way. And a wonderful reminder through many of the tributes paid to him of his life of prayer that really undergirded so much of all that he did. And the amount of that prayer that it really was a marked part of his day that he committed to just searching for God's purposes and God's direction. And there's that wonderful example for all of us, and it certainly continues to inspire me. So yes, may this be a year in which we find our own strength to stand up for what is right and good and wholesome in life. Also aware, though, that as we enter 2022, we do so with 2 years of COVID pandemic behind us. We have some hopes that the Omicron variant might just be marking the end of the pandemic itself and allowing it to become a more endemic experience in our lives and something more like common flu. But 2022 will tell where that is actually going. So we continue to live with a certain amount of uncertainty. And of course, with uncertainty goes anxiety, and even for many of us, some quite deep levels of fear, perhaps too. And so from a faith perspective, just so important to remind ourselves that we are people of faith. We're called to a deep trust in God's presence in our lives, in our world, that presence is always there, that it undergirds our lives, it enfolds our lives, it holds our lives. And this morning to just remind you of that and encourage you to continue to embrace that knowledge, and that it may not just be head knowledge, but it may become real heart knowledge, and something that even in terms of our bodies, we hold and we know that deep peace. A passage which has always been a special one of mine, and I suspect I've mentioned it in some of these talks before, but it's certainly one that I've held to throughout these last 2 years, and in the parish context, on a number of occasions, has just continued to share it. And that is the passage from Philippians 4:4-8, which obviously begins with the words, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say it, rejoice. Paul writing those words from a place of deep discomfort himself. We suspect probably in prison at the time. And a reminder that for us as people of faith, no matter how difficult our physical, material circumstances may be, that there is always room to draw on our relationship with God and to find that ability from deep within us to rejoice that we are not alone, that God is with us, God does hold us, God is here. And this particular passage for me really just highlights that. Goes on towards the end of verse 5 to say, the Lord is near. And for me, when the scriptures speak about the Lord being near, or the kingdom of God being near, it's not that it's just over there and getting closer, it's that it's near, it's here, it's part of who we are, it's tangible, it's something we can hold and grasp. It's not at a distance. It is near, it is nearby, it is with us. And so encourage us encourage you and myself as we walk into this year, to really embrace that sense of the nearness of God in our lives, and to allow that to be the source of our trust and our peace. The passage goes on in verse 6 to say, don't worry about anything. Now, that's a challenging thought for me, particularly because part of my personality is I do worry about everything. And I worry about things that actually never happen. And so those words are very, very pertinent for me, and I suspect for many of us. Just saying, do not worry about anything. But having said that, and as difficult as that is, it goes on to give us a way of dealing with the anxiety and worry in our lives by saying, don't worry about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. And so that encouragement, the example of Archbishop Desmond, to really allow prayer to be the foundation of our daily activity. Prayer is something we can withdraw into and never come out of. But prayer, from a point of scripture in a spiritual sense, is something that we actually live out of. And so there are moments where we withdraw into personal space, or we withdraw into worship space and community to be in prayer together. But it's something that actually marks the nature of our lives. And prayer for me has always been a conversation, and an ongoing conversation with God throughout the day. Just whether it's something in thought, whether I verbalize it, but just that sense that God is near, and therefore I can have an ongoing conversation with God. And as the concerns and worries and crises of the moment come up, God is there for the conversation. And so prayer is not just those times where we specifically withdraw to focus on the relationship with God, but it's just part of this ongoing lifestyle that we're part of, ongoing conversation with God. It speaks of supplication, it speaks of thanksgiving, and it encourages us to make our needs known to God. And that in itself can be quite challenging, because there's a sense we know that God knows everything. So why do I need to let my needs be known? And I think part of it is that when I let my needs be known to God, I become aware of my needs. So much of the time I'm unconscious of the needs I have. And for me, I think often my kind of focused times of personal prayer is just becoming aware, what are my needs right now? And in seeking to express that to God, hearing them myself, sometimes for the first time, but putting words, putting flesh to some things which kind of just sit in the back of my mind and create that anxiety. And somehow by putting them forward, putting flesh on them, having that conversation with God, those concerns, those needs, and the supplication that comes out of that really does have a good wholesome place, instead of being something that's distracting and even breaking in just one's ongoing unconscious awareness. Thanksgiving is so important, and despite the hardness and the struggle of COVID, there are things to be thankful for. And the very fact that I'm here talking to you in this digital space is something that really, as a church worldwide, I think we've embraced as a society worldwide. We're much more comfortable in communicating in this way. Not that this way really should take the place of face-to-face, but that it is a gift nonetheless. And then, of course, the challenge of where we're going in 2022. And certainly at St. Andrew's, we are seeking to re-engage with the in-person space. And so our 2 Sunday morning services are both, the one has been in person for a while, and our latest service now is also going in person. And we'll still have an online presence. We'll be live streaming instead of the more intimate Zoom that we've been doing. So there will be some changes, and I know all of that, certainly for myself, as we shift into a new way of doing things. It recreates a tension. And for many of you who've been engaging with us on the Zoom platform on a Sunday, I know that will impact for you as well. But to trust that God is a God who always leads us forward. And while we embrace, in a sense, returning back, but it will be different. So moving forward, to trust that God is with us in that. And my hope is, in discussion, particularly with our church wardens and later in the month with parish council, will be to say, there is this change. Let's continue, though, to hold what has been good. and let us move forward as we feel that God is leading and directing. And right now, as we continue to learn to live with COVID, as we really do now have to acknowledge it's not going away, it may change, and there may be different variants, and there may be different experiences of it, but we do have to learn to live with it. And there is nothing more powerful than being physically present together. And so for those of you who may be feeling a little fearful, just encourage you to have faith. And when I use that word faith, it's more than just some amorphous kind of thing. It's based in belief and trust in God's presence. It's belief and trust. The belief is kind of having the idea and holding that, but the trust actually gives it legs and enables us to walk forward, to step forward. And so to step forward in faith is to believe that God is with us, and it is to trust that God is with us, and to trust that as we find the courage to put our feet in the water, that lovely, lovely is maybe not quite the right word, but as God leads, or as Joshua leads the people of Israel into the promised land, he does so from across the Jordan into the promised land, into Palestine, Israel, at Jericho. Floodplains at that point, and at that time, the River Jordan, which is really quite a pretty little river, is in flood and was challenging. But it was as the priests of the Lord carrying the ark actually put their feet into the water that the mudslides take place higher up the river. The water flow is blocked, and the people of Israel are able to move across on dry land. So as we move into 2022, I'm praying that this may be our year of promised land, and that we may have our courage to put our feet into the water and trust that as we do so, God will act higher up, block off the flow of all that has been destructive and overwhelming in our lives, and that we may have the courage to cross over and to embrace the promised land, the promised goodness and presence of God in 2022 that lies before us. So yes, may we have faith in God. May we trust in God's faith in us, and may we have the courage to take that next step.